Welcome to a very different kind of explainer. Usually we're breaking down complex theories or dissecting the news, but tonight we're stepping right into the dark. We've gathered three deeply unsettling, absolutely true accounts that completely shatter the illusion of everyday safety. So go ahead, dim the lights, and let's jump right in.
Imagine looking into a mirror. Obviously, you expect to see yourself, right? But what happens when that basic rule of reality just shatters? Think about this quote. "It smiled in a way I never have." Just let that sink in for a second. The sheer impossibility of your own reflection acting completely on its own, it absolutely shakes the core of how we perceive the world.
All right, story number 1. A terrifying reflection in the window.
So this one starts with a 12-year-old kid. Their family lived in this bizarre rental house attached to a soda dealership. The layout was just incredibly claustrophobic. The kid and their sister were basically confined to the second floor, totally isolated from the chaos downstairs. And the ground floor? It was literally a maze of stacked soda cases. If you wanted to go down the stairs, you'd face this single, narrow window overlooking a veranda. But that veranda was packed floor to ceiling with towering stacks of empty soda boxes. It created this really murky, totally obstructed view with just a tiny sliver of space left. Honestly, it's the perfect, cramped setting for a nightmare. Anyway, one morning, the kid is hurrying downstairs and just freezes. Right there, looking through the clutter of that narrow window, they see a figure. Now notice how the fear builds here. First, they notice the shirt on the figure. It's exactly the same shirt they're wearing. Then, the terrifying realization hits. It's their own face looking back at them through the glass. But the worst part, the absolute worst part was the smile. It was this twisted, unfamiliar smile, just staring downward, and it made the narrator's skin crawl. It was a smile that did not belong to them. It just felt completely and utterly wrong. You can imagine the total paralysis that sets in. They're just frozen, staring at this impossible copy of themselves. And then, the reflection started to look up. Imagine the absolute panic of knowing that if those eyes met yours, something terrible was going to happen. Well, our narrator didn't wait to find out. They bolted straight out the back door. Of course, their sister completely dismissed it later, blaming it on a trick of the light. But man, even years later as an adult, that twisted, independent smile still haunts their dreams.
Now, think about your own backyard for a minute. It's your sanctuary, right? Your safe space. But what was waiting for Heather in the water? Imagine the terror of a threat that isn't supernatural at all, but entirely human, just hiding right in plain sight.
Which brings us to story number 2, an intruder in the home pool.
So Heather is a student who just wrapped up this grueling week-long project. Her parents head out of town for the weekend, leaving her entirely alone in the house for the very first time. And this house, it backs up directly to a dark, wild forest. Naturally, a heavy downpour suddenly kicks in. The timeline of this night is honestly a masterclass in building dread. At 8 p.m., her parents leave. Heather waits for the rain to let up so she can pull the heavy cover over their pool. By 8:20 p.m., she steps outside and finds the pool's mysteriously already halfway covered. She kind of rationalizes it, tells herself it's just the wind, but at 9:20 p.m., she checks again and the cover is completely off. She goes out, manually covers it herself. Then, we hit the terrifying climax at 2 a.m. The security motion sensor light suddenly clicks on.
But wait, let's rewind a bit to that 8:20 p.m. mark. While Heather was outside dealing with the cover that first time, she heard some rustling. She looks out into the pitch-black forest behind her house, and she sees a distinct flash of light in the trees. Someone out there with a flashlight had realized she was looking right at them. In a total panic, she runs back inside, locks every single door, and spends the next hour anxiously knitting by her bedroom window, just desperately trying to convince herself she's safe. All right, back to 2 a.m. The motion sensor is tripped. The pool cover is off again. Like, is this some kind of sick joke? Heather actually arms herself with a knife and walks out into the dead of night. And then, she sees it. In her own words, "To my horror, there was someone inside my pool. Hiding in the furthest corner, completely dressed in black, with a hoodie pulled tightly up, someone was fully submerged in the water. Keep in mind, even with the cover on, there's a small pocket of air underneath. This person had been there the entire time."
Suddenly, the figure in the water lunges, and they swim toward her at an unnaturally fast speed. Heather drops her knife, screams, and sprints inside, barely locking the sliding glass door before the man violently attacks the glass using her own dropped knife. Thankfully, the police arrive and arrest him. But here is the truly chilling revelation. The guy was a homeless man who actually used to be a highly decorated professional swimmer. And worse, her parents had completely covered the pool before they left at 8 p.m. This guy had been lurking, watching, and waiting in her backyard before she was even truly alone.
Those are two incredible stories about the sanctity of your home being completely breached. But what happens when you leave home? What lies hidden in the dark woods right behind your college campus? We're about to bridge the gap into our final, and honestly, perhaps most fatal, mystery.
Story number 3, Mysterious Rituals by the Lake. This one takes us to a university campus in India. Aishwarya, a computer science student, is sharing a 4th-floor dorm room that overlooks a really beautiful lake bordered by a dense reserve forest. One night, Aishwarya goes to bed early with a headache, but around 1 a.m., her friend wakes her up. She is physically shaking, literally too terrified to even speak. Aishwarya walks over to the window where her other roommates are already just frozen in fear. She looks down at the lake and sees this horrific scene: 2 half-naked men violently dancing around a roaring fire.
And what makes this even more terrifying is the sheer scale of it. This wasn't just a couple of guys at a bonfire, it was an entire crowd. Some of them were standing perfectly still, while others were actively praying in what looked like a highly organized cult-like ritual. And get this, it was a new moon night. In their local culture, new moon nights are rumored to be the specific time when devil worshippers come out to perform dark rituals, sometimes even involving human sacrifice. Overwhelmed by this really deep, instinctual sense of dread, Aishwarya begs her friends to just stop watching, close the curtains, and go to sleep. Before they shut the curtains, one friend did manage to record a super short video on her phone. But the very next day brought a genuinely chilling resolution. A dead body was found floating in that exact same lake. It was a boy from their college. Now, the police closed the case within weeks, officially ruling it a suicide, but there was no note. And almost immediately, these swirling rumors overtook the entire campus. Like, was he part of the cult? Or was he maybe trying to expose them and ended up paying the ultimate price?
Unfortunately, the truth was buried with him, but Aishwarya is left carrying this lingering, heavy dread. She asked, would we have seen more, or something we were never meant to see? Think about it. If she hadn't told her roommates to back away from that window, would they have witnessed an actual murder? Or, even worse, would the people around that fire have looked up to the 4th floor and seen them watching?
Which brings us to part 4. Are you really safe? So what's the common thread here? What are we supposed to take away from these encounters? Honestly, it's the incredibly fragile illusion of our safe spaces. Whether it's trusting your own reflection on a staircase, just doing a simple chore in your backyard on a rainy night, or simply looking out the window of your college dorm. We go through life operating on the assumption that the barrier between us and the horrors of the world is rock solid. But as these 3 true accounts prove, that barrier is terrifyingly thin.
They say knowledge is power, right? But sometimes truly understanding just how vulnerable we really are is the most frightening thing of all. So I want to leave you with one final thought as you wrap up your day. When you look out into the dark tonight, whether it's into a mirror, a dense forest, or even a quiet lake, are you absolutely sure nothing is looking back? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today, and please stay safe out there.